One of our speakers at the summit is Babusi Nyoni, who we have here with us today. Babusi, we can share our cameras now. We can come up onto the screens. And really what we focus on today is how do we heal with code and the future of health tech in Africa. From delayed diagnoses to inaccessible treatments, healthcare in Africa really faces challenges. But exponential technologies are changing this game. And Babusi Nyoni, who is an AI innovator, he's the founder of Sila Health, which is an incredible platform we're going to get into, is really pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And he's actually just flown back to South Africa, currently living in Amsterdam. So we are very fortunate to have him here today. And so if we can give a big jumping round of applause for Babusi, you can just jump. That's your way of clapping in the metaverse. Thank you. Look at all those jumpers. Brilliant. Babusi, how are you doing?
Oh, good, Mitch. How you doing?
All good, all good. Yeah, thanks for joining us here today. And tell me what brought you to South Africa for this trip?
For this trip, I was speaking at an event at Spotify yesterday, like an internal industry event. I was just giving a keynote address.
And what was it focused on?
I was focused on AI in music. So just a 20-minute keynote and then yeah, pretty lengthy Q&A with people from anything as far as like music labels, like music publishers, you name it, like actual musicians in the audience. So everyone in the music business was in attendance. Spotify Africa, so a lot of people who are heading up music-related operations on the continent were present yesterday.
Incredible. And I mean, you didn't start off in the space. I mean, you've got a very versatile um, wheelhouse. So I think we would love to touch on some of that about music and AI a bit later. But tell me what inspired you in your journey in healthcare in Africa, and how did you get into this, and what have you actually built with Sila Health?
Yeah, I think maybe what might be nice to start with is actually my journey into like tech and AI. So I taught myself how to code in 2013 while living in Cape Town. And around 2016, I was tasked with coming up with a campaign idea while working in advertising for Heineken, and this was for the UEFA Champions League final. And my pitch was to build an AI football commentator, and the idea got approved, but we we couldn't settle on the fee to pay the vendor to build out the AI chatbot. So a lot of digital agencies in South Africa at the time were still new to AI. So, and this is 2016, fair enough. So what they quoted to build this out was astronomical, because I think we had to pay for the cost of them having to learn how it all works. So the idea got shelved, and I said, not on my watch. I'm going to learn how to build things with AI. And I built this natural language processing chatbot back in 2016 to interact with Heineken fans on Twitter throughout the duration of the UEFA Champions League final. And since then, I haven't looked back. I've just been exploring different ways to build use cases for AI technologies within the African context, and which brings me to AI in health. And this started with the idea initially to connect doctors to patients in Africa digitally. But I realized that connecting doctors to patients doesn't solve any of the institutional voids that Africa's healthcare systems are you know, currently suffering from. So if doctor-patient ratios are sometimes like 1 to 5,000, then what does it mean for you to connect a doctor with a patient? You don't actually solve anything. And I actually realized this was in I think around 2017, no, 2019, sorry. I realized in 2019 that there was an opportunity to use AI to start to bridge the gap between doctors and patients, by outsourcing to AI some of these level interactions, like collecting patient symptoms and whatnot. And together with a very small team, built an AI chatbot that interacted with patients in Africa on Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp, allowing them to get instant answers to any questions related to their health, and then where needed, connect them to doctors, and in so doing, allow them to consent to having the most recent symptoms sent to the doctors to save doctors time in collecting that information.
Just phenomenal. I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, I think there's probably, if you think about the current health tech landscape in Africa, there's a lot of gaps in public
For
health
sure.
system infrastructure. Like what you were saying, around 1 to 5,000. Is that's sort of the number of like one doctor to 5,000 patients type of thing.
Yeah, correct. At its peak, yeah.
So like there's quite a lot of gaps, and there's and at Singularity, if you want to make $1 billion, try help solve a billion people problem. So
Yeah, for sure.
it's what are some of the challenges that we're seeing in this space? What's still missing?
Um, so I think what's been really critical has been digitization, and I think it's something I'll also touch on later. But a lot of Africa's health records uh, s- um, are created and stored in very offline ways. So doctors are still writing notes on paper in their handwriting. And what that means is that you don't really have the ability to, for example, search uh, retrospectively for a patient's history in order to see, for example, drug interactions that might, at some point of giving care, be a cause for alarm based on, what they've been prescribed to before, or what their, like chronic ailments are. So every time a patient goes to see a new doctor, they have to build their patient file from scratch, unless doctors literally request and retrieve the physical documents that other healthcare providers have been collecting on a patient's history. So that really introduces many limitations. Um, it means that, patient intake becomes very lengthy. So the time it takes to actually administer care now becomes lengthened. And this is already something exacerbated by the doctor patient ratios. And just to correct myself, sorry, it's a 500, not 5,000. And what that means as well is it creates a bottleneck for the kinds of innovation that are actually possible. So we're seeing massive strides in digital health in what is called the global north. So, people being able to easily integrate AI into ways to, you know, distill patient histories, ways to uh, in real time check for drug interactions as doctors are prescribing medication. Um, and because we don't have this digitization, these are all things that, I feel like we're actually going to miss this wave as people on the African continent. I mean, countries like South Africa do a really good job of having health records digitized, and there's protocols around that. But outside of that, you find typically there's no digital trace of what it means for a doctor to have seen a patient. And that, for people like me who work within the digital health field, it just means there's not really much we can do in terms of problem solving, and in terms of looking forward into the future as well. We're still trying to solve this very basic problem of digitizing health records.
So it's like a data problem. The data
It's a
is
data problem, exactly.
it's
Yeah, the
messy.
data stuck on paper.
It's the worst place to be in
Yeah,
stuck on
for
paper.
sure. In 2025.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I mean,
yeah.
tell us a little bit about Sila Health. How many people have you helped, and how's it how's it actually help
Ye-
people in Africa?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so our chatbot has had millions of interactions, like messages exchanged, and this is across like multiple countries beyond Africa's borders. We've had um, a moderate level of success in going to market with a product. So we introduced a product called Health Pass around 2020. And this is a platform that allows us to use our digital ecosystem of tools, which include electronic health records processing, video conferencing, bill management, like all these things, to help immigrants who are sending money home to pay for care in the best way possible. So we've been doing pretty well on that front. We've been able to grow a small team in Zimbabwe and have like a brick and mortar place there, which is really fun for a very online startup. But also making sure that the people who are receiving chronic medication on a monthly basis don't have any uncertainty with regards to receiving their medication. So we've really built a suite of solutions around ensuring that the people who need medication regularly receive it. And then, of course, with our AI tools around patient inductions, so collecting symptoms and whatnot, we also make it easy for people who are starting their healthcare journey digitally to do so. So, yeah, that's where we are right now.
Amazing, eh? Amazing, amazing. And I mean, how has this wave of AI that's come into the world, how's that advanced your platform? Have you upgraded the bots with ChatGPT, with Claude, or what?
Yeah. So we haven't. So with digital health, you have a lot of limitations around how you can actually move data. So in a lot of markets, actually, you cannot store patient data anywhere else apart from the physical location in which it's collected. So actual servers in a practice and whatnot are by law required. And then in some markets you're able to have a self-contained digital environment, like your own like a virtual server, for example, which is what we do. And what that means is that we cannot use like the latest like state of the art AIs like OpenAI, like Gemini and whatnot. So we really had to miss that wave because we had to protect our patients' privacy, regardless of how cool it would have been to, immediately integrate OpenAI into our platform. But what we've been able to do recently is to run our own instance of a language model. And what this helps us do is to to retrieve patient history while a doctor's writing notes to ensure that we surface very critical information for a physician at the moment that they're providing care to a patient, and then also checking for drug interactions as well when prescriptions are made. So that's where we're at, but we had to unfortunately miss this really big fun wave of AI in the interest of protecting the rights of our patients.
So interesting that the actual protection, which I'm sure you could get it if you had if you API'd into those into OpenAI or Gemini or Claude, you could have a sort of closed, safe environment. But because of the law and the
Yeah,
government, probably restricts you.
for sure. And there's actually ways around it. I mean, I do think OpenAI, maybe this was like recent news, but they are now mandated by the US government to like share conversation history, which itself just immediately becomes a big no-no. But there are ways to anonymize patient data as well, so you could also just send information with non-personally identifiable markers. So like X patient has this history, these are the symptoms that they present, so you could do that, but then just the fact that this information is moving from the site to some other place into a completely different ecosystem whose security and encryption we don't control, it just opens us up to a level of scrutiny that would actually cripple us. So it's just something that we just had to let pass by. And yeah, hopefully in the future, there will be like some kinds of regulations in place that allow for not necessarily like a loosening of the restrictions, but more something that caters to where we're at right now in terms of what is possible with tech and even more specifically with AI.
Yeah, because I think if you think about AI agents and creating AI doctors,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure you do. I use ChatGPT. If I've got a cold, which I've just had now, for advice all the time. So and it's just getting better
yeah,
and better and better. It's not they always refer you back to a doctor, but
yeah, of course. Yeah,
as the large language models are just keep improving and getting better, you're going to definitely have these agents that will be your doctors of the future, or doctors will be required to
sure.
have an agent with them all the time when prescribing.
I think so. I think, that's actually the future that I would like because what AI is able to do from an efficacy perspective, I think it would really 10x a doctor's ability to provide effective service. And right now, um, everyone's looking at this from unfortunately, like from a moral lens, which I think is completely the wrong way to perceive how a tool like AI could be used in the right hands for the right purposes, and in this case, by physicians. I'm hoping in future we'll see, um, yeah, a more forward-looking way to craft these kinds of regulations because all of it I feel is just it's stuck in like late 90s, early 2000s, and really doesn't cater to never mind where we're going, like where we're at right now.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And how can governments and startups and technologists work together to help scale solutions like yours? How do we create this collaborative environment with policymakers and public and private partnerships to really try to just improve the advancement of the space?
Yeah, I think to answer that question, I would have to actually acknowledge the work that Meta has been doing in allowing like state-of-the-art models like Llama to be open sourced, and in so doing, creating a culture around um, just making these kinds of technologies accessible. And why that is important in answering the question is, the actual wave of AI right now has been driven by companies with very closed ecosystems. So, OpenAI being, the one at the fore, and despite their name, they actually don't open source any of their model weights. Same with Claude, same with Gemini. So what that then means is any conversations around AI have always been in the context. I mean, post ChatGPT, have always been in the context of how governments can interface with this technology that is being made in the West, and this is speaking in an African context. So already, what that does is it just creates this unnecessary number of degrees between what's been made and how it can be implemented, or how regulation can be created in order to govern its use. But I think the more we have open sourced versions of this technology that are state of the art, the more we'll have grassroots innovations built on top of it, thereby starting direct conversations with, maybe from a municipal to provincial to a government level, like how these pilot programs can be implemented on a nationwide scale, then therefore how do you regulate this kind of thing? So I think that kind of shift would need to happen before we see a more proactive relationship between the way governments and grassroots efforts are interfacing. Because I think at the moment everything is, people sitting in a room in a conference in an African country and speaking about technology that has been developed in San Francisco. And because we have this latency, I think it doesn't make any of it real, It doesn't feel like something that governments should focus on. I'm sure a lot of these these old men have seen these things come and go, you know, so it doesn't feel like something that is worth investing the kind of care that they need to, especially from a regulatory perspective. So I'm hoping within the next 2 to 3 years we'll start to see, especially with um, things like models being able to be run locally, and also with the model context protocol, so allowing for AI agents to interface with different kinds of software. And if all that is built in an open source way, we'll see a wave of innovation from Africa, or at least that will allow uh, people who are in positions to make decisions to have a clear idea of what this technology actually represents from very specific use cases that have clear delivered impact and very measurable um, progress. And I think that would be something that would make that conversation easier. But for now, from what I've seen from the rooms I've been in, it's just not it's just, yeah, we just don't have the people at the top who actually get what all of this is, and won't get what it is in the next 2 years, of which it would have changed so much. But hopefully, open source will make this conversation tangible for them.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic. I mean, Imad Mustak, who one of the founders of Stability.ai and Stable Diffusion,
Yeah,
he always tells me, not your models, not
yeah,
your mind. You know, if it's not your models, not your
exactly.
mind. Yeah, so there's
Yeah,
a whole idea of all of these large language models coming from the US. There needs to be sovereignty with these AI models, and it actually needs to be built, in Africa using open source, like you say, from Meta, uh,
yeah,
one of their models, and that, so that we can actually build. Otherwise, you're always going to be sort of, you know, controlled by the LLM, and a lot of these American LLMs, like you were saying, they're closed source and they're controlling the data. And there was also this talk about LLMs being commoditized, with DeepSeek and what's going on in China, but it won't actually be commoditized if they stay closed and they keep advancing their LLMs,
yeah. I mean,
and
yeah,
that
DeepSeek did,
progress.
like, they open source their weight, but yeah, and I think that commodification, I actually spoke about this yesterday. I think that's the fundamental problem with the current wave of AI, is that it's coming up in an ecosystem, Silicon Valley, that rewards very specific metrics. So number of monthly active users, monthly recurring revenue, like all these things that are very like mass market. And what that ultimately means is that the business models don't really care for uh not to sound corny, but they don't really care for Ubuntu, So the easiest thing to monetize is the media right now, So a lot of people spend an insane amount of time on their phones consuming things in an algorithmic way. And then what that means is, if you want to create something of value that, um within like maybe a year, you're making like 100 million plus ARR. What that then means is you will have to create a commodity of something that is media based. So all these Studio Ghibli, illustration converters, like all these things that completely undermine the intellectual property of artists. Yesterday we spoke about AI in music, and how musicians feel like their rights are being trampled upon by platforms like Suno AI and whatnot. Google just released VO3, which has incredible like video generating capabilities, but all of this is trained on YouTube data, of which a lot of people, when signing up to the platform and uploading their videos, did not inherently consent to, of course, because they didn't know what was coming. But all of it ultimately speaks to the model, the financial model, and like the rewards and how they're set up in Silicon Valley, in that you need X metrics in order to validate whether or not this is worth investing in, for your like Series B and whatnot. And unfortunately, that kind of model is, I don't think that's how we should be looking at AI right now. Like, it's actually crazy. Like, we're talking about being close to artificial general intelligence, but the way in which we interface with it is through a $20 per month subscription to a chat service. Like, is that not insane to anyone? you know? How is that the thing? Like we're talking about the singularity, and it's like, yeah, for $20 a month. Like, wait, what?
It's actually $200 if you want the FOST models, you know.
Yeah, oh yeah, fair. I'm sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm sure when you get to the singularity model, it would be, I don't know, like $1,000 a month to have like an AI human on the other side, you know? And that's just like, that's insane that we actually accepted that, you know? Like this is a massive shift in the course of human civilization. Like we've been dreaming about this for decades, you know? And then now we're here and it's like, oh yeah, it's a subscription service that you can pay for. Like,
Yeah, and I heard something crazy like OpenAI's got 500 million users now. They're going to make between 5 and 10
yeah, yeah, yeah,
dollars.
yeah.
Yeah, from those
No, it's insane.
$20 and two or $200 subscriptions. They got like a couple of million businesses using OpenAI. So it's just I totally agree with you. It's such an interesting perspective, on the future. And Peter Diamandis, one of the founders of Singularity, he says, any of these technologies that go through this digitization go through the 6Ds framework. I don't know if you've heard that, where
No, no, I haven't.
they become digitized, and then there's this deceptive phase where it looks like almost nothing's happening, and they're growing slowly, and it's you don't realize it's on this exponential growth pattern, and then it hits the third D, which is disruption, and it disrupts and takes off, and then
Mm.
it dematerializes, it disappears from the real world, it demonetizes, and it democratizes. But it feels like we're a long way away from these AI models.
Yeah, for
Do, do,
sure. Which is why I'm betting on open source, you know. So I think the more Meta keeps, and they're doing it for their own reasons, you know. They feel that they can flood the market with open source alternatives to these state-of-the-art models, then it'll chip into the valuations of a lot of these companies. Um, and remove whatever moat they think they might have in terms of like AI IP. But I do think the more of a focus we have, I mean, when DeepSeek came out, you know, like was it R2? When R2 came out, that was a really, really big moment, you know. And once people were able to replicate the results of that paper, I think there was a big shift in how people looked at open source, and also a bit of an axis shift as well in terms of how people perceived a lot of the innovation coming out of China, you know. So this was a very different way to not well not fully different but a different way to train a large language model, and I think going forward we'll have more moments like this DeepSeek R2 moment, also very likely from China as well, and I think that'll change the current model of how we perceive the actual value of AI, and what the singularity will look like when it does happen. Hopefully, it won't be behind a paywall, which is also just insane.
yeah, totally. Yeah. We're hoping for sure that won't happen. Um, but if also, I mean, if you think about all of these challenges and all of these friction points that we're facing, there's still a huge amount of opportunity for growth and for solving
For
some of these
sure.
problems. So, like, what's exciting you about the next 5 years in African health innovation?
Uh, I mean, I think I do need to do like a current state of affairs assessment on the digitization of health records, because I do feel that AI agents present the next frontier. I don't think people quite get what AI agents will make possible. Like, I think the next 2 years will be very interesting. Whatever AI anxiety people might have now would, I think, go 100, 200x for sure. But on the greener side of that, I do feel that the ability to put um, a highly efficient, highly adaptive, highly intelligent AI model dedicated to a task up until the task is done presents itself with so many possibilities, you know. We of course always think about bad actors, as we should, but I think being able to deploy an AI agent to um, you know, retrospectively look at an entire like patient database to flag, for like comorbidities like cancer and whatnot. Um, I think that for me is very exciting. A lot of what AI agents could do right now, because of this digitization problem that we have in healthcare in Africa, could actually just be done with a simple AI. So the agentic approach for me is a bit premature right now, but hopefully, in the next coming years, we'll see. Uh, a a rise in the application of AI agents um, in sectors of society that desperately need them. But outside of healthcare, I'm for sure excited about um, using AI agents, especially with the number of platforms that have been introduced in this model context protocol into their platforms. I think the future is going to be exciting for sure.
Absolutely, and just so for everyone who doesn't know, MCP is what is that model where it's actually taking these agents and allowing them to connect to different platforms and do the tasks for you. So it can connect to your email, it can connect to your social platforms, it can connect to
Yeah,
um, different inventories or manufacturing, and really just do all of the tasks rather than just being a chatbot. It's actually an agent
yeah.
working with MCP servers. We were also chatting with these guys last week about vibe coding, which is also a
Oh
phenomenal space.
yeah.
We talk to these AI
Yeah,
models to help you code and create for you without having to need a code yourself, which you almost like become the product manager and you've got this army of coders underneath you. But the guys were saying in that discussion that you need to still understand how to read the code and write the code so you can tell if it's right or wrong, and you still need to be an expert in the
yeah,
space. What are your thoughts on that?
for
And then,
sure. Yeah.
sorry, just to, before we we are opening up for questions. I know we are running short on time, so if anyone's got any questions, you can walk up to those blue little circles, or you can write in the chat, and we'll answer them. Back to you, Babusi.
Okay, yeah, sure. I mean, I love vibe coding. I code with AI as well now, which is really great. And also the simultaneously very frustrating. So the thing with models, and actually there was a study that was done, I think they released the results on the 15th, which was 4 days ago, on on how good AI is for code. And if you code with AI, if there's any developers in attendance, you'll know that for the first hour, if you're consistently coding with the AI, it performs really well. But after 10 hours, or like a 10-hour context window of, just like, this is the code, fix this thing, fix that, the quality of the inference becomes less and less and less. And yeah, so someone did a study. Let me just see where they're from. A researcher at Oxford, yeah, did a study that looked at the success rate per 10-minute steps. And so they found that if there's a 10% chance of error per 10 minutes, then the first hour would give you a 53% success rate. The fourth hour will give you an 8% success rate. And
Wow.
after 10 hours, you get 0.002% success. So this is just like a half-life decay almost. Or it does give you like a bit of a shelf in the beginning, so you do have, uh, really good quality inferences, but after that, the quality just absolutely gets demolished. And if I hadn't seen this, I would have just assumed that AI wasn't really smart, because you always forget like the first couple of interactions. Now, when you're like hours deep into a conversation and you're like, this is actually not really smart at all. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of charts and everything across like different models like Claude, uh, and that's from Anthropic, and then O1 from OpenAI, looking at the quality of inferences over time, and all of them are pretty consistent, like all pretty consistent. And all that to say that if you're vibe coding and you know how to code, coding with AI can become extremely frustrating So that's why I think they're saying that it's good for you to know how to code when you're coding with AI because AI hallucinates a lot, and the more you code with AI, the more it will hallucinate. And I was saying this to a friend that I think we'll see more mental health caregivers and providers pop up now for people who work with AI. Because if you're working with a colleague who's incompetent, you would go to HR. But if you're spending the entire day with an AI that just doesn't get it, you have no one to vent to. There's literally nothing, you know. And I remember there's so many times I was working on something for such a long time, and then when it was dinner time, I would just come to the dinner table with a frown on my face because the AI just didn't get it. And I'm just like, that's actually insane. Like, but of course, you know, I'm working the entire time, and if I was working a 9 to 5 with a colleague sitting beside me, I would feel the same way too. But we probably have hundreds of thousands of developers right now who get so frustrated working with an AI with no mental health outlets at all for that. So I think just
That's
yeah, just
exactly it's a good
yeah.
business idea. We're going to make the AI psychologist to help with
E
the developers.
Exactly. I was thinking if it's gonna be an AI psychologist, but also that will probably start to fail at some point. But yeah, there definitely would need to be some kind of like spillover for that. So yeah, I'm putting my money on that, and you can quote me in like 2, 3 years when this actually becomes real.
Yeah, and I mean, these guys were saying that Gemini is actually probably the best LLM to use for vibe coding at the moment because they've got a very large
For
context
sure, because
window.
the context window. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's 2 million tokens for sure.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think even then, I think, yeah, of course, like after 10 hours for sure. But the 2 million context window is a game changer for sure. So having a model understand so much immediately within what we've already decided, like that first hour is hypercritical for whatever you want to get done. And already being able to give it 2 million tokens immediately, which, you know, with ChatGPT, that would be like hours later that you would get to, you know, 2 million contexts. And then by that time, the quality of the output's just deteriorated. So yeah, Gemini for sure, that's the one. I switched to Gemini recently, actually.
Oh, really? Eh? Yeah. So,
Yeah.
we've got a couple of questions coming through, and I can see some people in the blue circles. If you
Nice.
want to just unmute yourself, you can. We'll be able to hear you when you talk. You can just press M to unmute, or that little audio button on your screen. I can see somebody from UNISA in the blue circle there. If you want to ask, or NK Handu also in the blue circle. And while you guys are doing that, I'll ask LZ. LZ's got a question here. With all this hype in social media regarding AI and no code platforms, have you found anything that actually stands out? Like is Replit one of the top ones at the moment, or you get browser based and
Oh, yeah,
IDE?
yeah. Yeah, so I think a lot of these like no code platforms, they work with specific tech stacks. So I think Replit does React Web. I might be wrong, but I think they do React Web specifically. So if you ever wanted it to just like make a React Native app, it couldn't do that, you know. Um, so they've got like their own limitations. They are hyper efficient at very specific things. So a lot of people like me who are just generalists, we use mainly like the native language models on ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude. So we use that typically. So it's just really about, you know, the quality of the inference as well as the context window, of which for me Gemini is a top performer. But yeah, I've tried to use platforms like Replit and whatnot, and maybe it's because I was working on a React Native app at the time, but they're more efficient for like one shot like prompt to output pipelines, of which if you work in code already, you kind of want more control over how you're setting up a product, you know. So like real developers who are, you know, I'm saying real developers, funny, but a lot of developers typically would want to set up their own environment in a specific way. So using something like Replit that gives you just like one shot, I want a calculator app that does this, is that, and then gives you an entire project. That's not necessarily always the most ideal way to do so, but it's more for like hobbyists and like enthusiasts, and not so much professionals, I feel.
Absolutely agree. There's also like if you are a coder, there's things like Lovable or Cursor that you can use, or
Yeah, so
Same.org.
yeah.
But they're all very
Yeah,
hard to get a reliable result out of it without a lot of pain and
that's
frustration.
the thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
Cursor, like I you're so right. Yeah, I've used Cursor before, and I was just like, what is the actual purpose of you being embedded in my development environment if you don't quite understand the relationship between files, and then you're just back at the drawing board. And yeah, that frustration would just like take you back to something like ChatGPT or something, and really rather just explain like, this is my file tree, this is this file specifically, because yeah, like a lot of it I feel is like parts like snake oil, part also just like already part of the way. So things are still being figured out in real time, of course. But yeah, I did try Cursor as well. I was not really impressed.
it's a lot of these AI startups are just making a quick buck off people. But just
Yeah, for
sign up for the
sure.
subscription, and then you have to remember to cancel it. But we've got it.
Yeah.
Tokorza's got a question here. How do AI health chatbots reach communities without smartphones or reliable internet, not yet on the digital platform?
That's a good question. So there's a type of service provider called a community healthcare worker in East Africa. They operate mainly in, I think, Uganda, Kenya, maybe Tanzania as well. So what they do is they move around communities with a mobile phone and do all the things that a doctor would do, but they do this um, from a very like inverted model. So in scenarios like that, you have a healthcare worker who, could then use a chatbot in their interfacing with a patient. But then at the same time, if I'm here, then I'm here. So there's a possibility of having, kiosks with locally run models, because locally run models are a big thing now. So running a model on an edge device. I love how there's always just like lingo for like a new thing. So laptops and phones are now called edge devices, and a lot of models are now able to run on edge devices offline. So what that then means is you could, buy an iPad, a basic iPad, and as long as it's powered in some way, maybe by solar or something, you could have a snapshot of whatever time that was, AI model that can answer questions related to healthcare. But the problem with that is you always want to close the loop with an actual healthcare provider when it comes to healthcare. So there's just a lot of considerations to be made. So I do feel maybe healthcare might not be the field and we'd want this very offline and very low fidelity way of interfacing with AI, because of the considerations you have to make. But yeah, there are possibilities as I've just outlined.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. We want to really try and bring healthcare into this digital fray to be fully digitized, and we've actually got another speaker, Faye Ojamondi, that's coming to the summit to talk about from moving from cloud infrastructure to AI edge infrastructure as we move to this edge computing world, which is
Yeah, I like that.
peer-to-peer
Yeah,
computing. Yeah, so it's a super interesting space, and should help solve some of these issues around moving big data into various territories and locations. So I know
for
we have
sure.
run out of time, but I do definitely want to ask you about some of your other life, which is around
Oh
making
yeah,
music and making
for
incredible
sure.
music and hit songs, like worldwide hit songs, using AI.
Yeah.
Do you want to just share a little bit about that and what you're doing in that space?
Yeah, real quick. Yeah, so in 2019, so in 20, I think it was 2018, or was it 2017? I made a song, a GLOM song using AI. And the reason why I did that
2017.
was
Wow, that was
AI,
a long time ago.
yeah, I think it was 2018, yeah.
Still a
I
long
made a
time.
GLOM song with AI, And the reason why I used AI to make a poem song was AI music generation at that point produced very broken melodies that were not really musical, and then if you know anything about Gqom, especially the first wave of it, is that it was also very jagged and raw, and the rhythms were very like syncopated, and didn't follow like a traditional like 4/4 like pattern. And I figured that it would be perfect to use AI to make Gqom, because AI was making this kind of broken music, and Gqom music, like, you can't have the same beat pattern as someone else. You have to really think, what is another way I can arrange these drums? Like, that's the novelty of making a Gqom song. So I made this pretty basic Gqom song with AI, wrote an article about it. And then fast forward to 2019, I then had the idea to use population trend data to anticipate what could be a big genre in Amsterdam, where I live now. So I pulled census data dating as far back as 1995, that also had parameters around the country of origin of the immigrant, if the person who was like measured in census was an immigrant. So I looked specifically at immigrants and where they came from 1995 to 2018, because that was as most recent as the data was. Then I also pulled chart data from Dutch radio station Funx and Dutch charts, which plugged in gaps for Funx. And I started to look at the correlation between where people come from and the kinds of music uh, they influence, based on what hits charts. So I started to see very clear signals on, for example, when people come from certain parts of Asia, uh, the hit song in the Netherlands a year or two down is more than likely an international song. Whereas immigrants coming from places like Africa, I think South America as well, they led to the hit song being a Dutch song. So it started to speak to, like efforts around like integration and whatnot, and the kinds of musical influences that certain immigrant groups have as well. So I made a song with a South African artist, DJ Lag, who's like one of the most prominent Gqom artists, if not the most, and a Dutch artist. And yeah, it was really cool. But we released it literally just as COVID hit. So all the clubs closed, all the festivals closed, and also within the 2-year window that the country was completely locked down, the immigration trends were completely reimagined. So whatever the machine had extrapolated and anticipated as being the ethnographic makeup of the Netherlands by that date had completely transformed. But post-COVID, I went back to the machine, fed back new data, and made this combination of Gqom and South American music, which was what the machine indicated was going to track really well. And last year, I had my validation moment. It really, really took off. I just came back from touring in Asia now, and yeah, this this AI informed new genre that I made, which combines South American music and Gqom, is just being embraced globally now.
Wow, wow, amazing. Everybody, let's give a big jumping round of applause for AI innovator Babusi Nyoni. Thank you so much, everybody. And
Thank you
we run
all.
out of time. And yes, thank you so much, Babusi. We can't wait to see
Thank
you
you, Nick.
at the summit on the 21st.
Yes, I can't wait. I can't wait.
And yeah, if you haven't already, we do have an AI DJ in the main area there, and you can go and request any music from the AI DJ that will make up your songs for you based on any style, if you want to go have a listen. But thank you so much for everyone who joined, and we'll catch you on the next one. Make sure to like and subscribe to Exponential Africa. We will be producing this as a podcast and a YouTube show. So thank you, everybody, and have a great
Cool.
evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lakshmi. I can see you from India.
Thank you so much.
And cheers, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.